How was your day? Maybe nothing went wrong. You did what was expected, kept the small machine of your life turning, and now you are tired in a quiet way. There is a young woman in a story exactly like that. Her name is Toni Buddenbrook. The book is Buddenbrooks. Thomas Mann published it in 1901. And it is about a family doing what is expected of them. For 4 generations. This is exactly that story. The duty handed down. The quiet weight you carry without quite naming it. So lie back. You don't have to follow every word. The book will still be here tomorrow. Maybe today felt heavy in a way you couldn't quite explain. Nothing collapsed. You answered the messages. You kept the promises. And still, somewhere underneath, a small quiet ache. That ache is older than today. Families have been handing it down for centuries. What to do, who to be, what success is supposed to look like. Tonight we listen to one such family very gently, in the dark. Every week, one book, no pressure. Just the story and a quiet place to land. The greatest books ever written, read slowly, in the dark, until your eyes close on their own. It begins on an autumn afternoon in 1835, in a city you may not have visited. Lübeck, on the northern coast of Germany. A red brick city of gabled houses leaning over narrow streets. There is a house on Mengstrasse. The Buddenbrooks have just bought it from another old merchant family that fell. Tonight is the housewarming. The whole town that matters is invited. Picture the rooms inside. The landscape room, named for the painted wallpaper of pastoral scenes that covers all 4 walls. A tall white tiled stove warming one corner. A fire of candles in the chandelier above. Here is the man of the house. Old Johann Buddenbrook, 70 years old, white-haired, broad-shouldered. He has built the family firm into one of the firmest in Lübeck. Here's where it begins to matter. His son Jean is at his side. The consul, they call him. Mid-40s, slender, gentle of voice. He runs the firm now in everything but name. He carries a small Bible in his coat pocket. He is a careful man. The consul's wife, Elizabeth, Bethsy, moves between the rooms greeting the guests. Bright reddish, blonde hair pinned high. A small jet brooch at her throat. Born of one of the oldest Hanseatic houses in the city. Their 3 children are here too. Thomas, the eldest, 10 years old already with the still face of a man. Christian, 8, watching everything sideways. And little Toni, 8 as well, with cheeks already pink from excitement. They have been told to be still and to be seen. Thomas folds his hands the way his father does. Christian fidgets. Toni, when no one is looking, leans forward to peer into the chandelier above her head. The doors open. Guests arrive in furs and silk. The pastor of St. Mary's. The town's other merchant families, a poet from Hamburg in for the evening. Hands are pressed. Old jokes are made. Wine is poured. We'll stay with this one tonight. There's more in man's world. More nights, more books, on other evenings. If you drift away somewhere in this house, the book will still be here tomorrow. At the long table they are seated by rank. The consul carves the goose. Old Johann tells a small joke from his youth in the Napoleonic Wars. The room laughs because it should. The candles burn lower. A guest raises a glass. To this old house, he says, and to its new family. To business that lasts longer than any one of us. The consul nods. Old Johann smiles briefly and looks down. Here's where it gets interesting. There is one chair at the table that is empty. The chair belongs to old Johann's eldest son, not Jean. Another son from another marriage long ago. His name is Gotthold. Old Johann's first wife died young. He remarried. The second marriage gave him Jean. The first son, Gotthold, married a shopkeeper's daughter and was quietly cut from the line. That night, in the warmth of the housewarming, no one says his name, but he has written a letter. The consul's clerk has placed it on the desk in the office on the trave, and it waits. After the guests have gone, the consul lights a small lamp. He carries it through quiet corridors to the office. He sits at his father's desk. He breaks the seal. He reads. Gotthold writes carefully. He is poor, his wife is ill. He asks for his share of the new house. The house that should have been part of his inheritance too. He asks not as a son, but as a man with bills. The consul folds the letter. He sits a long while in the lamplight. He thinks of the price they paid for the house. He thinks of his half-brother, whom he has not seen in years. He thinks of duty. The lamp burns lower. In the morning he speaks to his father. Old Johann listens, jaw set. He will not give Gotthold the share. The firm comes first, he says. It always has. The consul agrees because he has been raised to. A reply is written, brief, polite. It explains that the firm is what feeds them all. That tradition cannot be cracked open for one man's debts. The consul signs it, he blots the ink, he seals it. He hands the letter to a clerk. The clerk slips out into the cobbled street. The reply will travel by mail coach to the next town. It will arrive in 3 days. The matter, as old Johann calls it, is closed. Notice how no one speaks of it again at the dinner table. Notice how the consul carries the small ache in his coat pocket beside his Bible. Notice how the children sense, without knowing, that something has been decided. This is how the house begins, with pride and a careful kindness and one small wound that will not quite close. The kind of wound a family learns to live around. The kind that, much later, finds its way into the children. For tonight that is enough. The candles in the chandelier are blown out one by one. The Buddenbrooks go upstairs. The house on Mengstrasse settles into its first night. We will pick up the story again soon. Years move like water in this house. The seasons turn over Mengstrasse. The consul rises early and walks to the office. Old Johann grows quieter. The children climb the wide staircase a little taller each spring. Thomas at 12 already walks the way his father walks. Hands quiet at his sides, chin level. He wants to do everything correctly. He wants very much for his father to look at him and nod. Christian, the same age, drifts. He imitates the gait of strange men he has seen in the street. He tells long stories at dinner about pains in his side that no one else can locate. The family laughs, then doesn't. Tony at 12 is bright, cheeked, talkative, sure of one thing, that she is a Buddenbrook. She corrects strangers who do not know how to say her family's name. She loves the painted landscape wallpaper as if it were her own. In the garden behind the house, the children play. Tony rules over imaginary kingdoms among the box hedges. Thomas reads his father's old letters. Christian acts out scenes from operas no one has seen. Old Johann watches from the upstairs window. He is 76. He sleeps badly. He walks more slowly now from one room to another. His handwriting in the firm's ledgers has grown smaller, neater, almost careful. He tells the consul, almost in passing, "When I am gone, the firm goes to you. You have already been carrying it. Just continue." The consul nods. He does not say what he feels. A winter comes harder than the last. The trave freezes early. Old Johann no longer walks down to the office. The children are told to be quiet on the upstairs landing. The house begins very softly, to wait. The consul reads to his father in the evenings. Psalms. A little Goth. Old Johann smiles sometimes. He asks for the children to be brought to the door, so he can see them. He does not ask them to come closer. One morning he is gone. The consul finds him at first light, hands folded over the blanket, exactly as if he had been arranging them himself. The clock by the bed ticks on. The consul sits a long while. The bell of St. Mary's tolls slowly that afternoon. Lou Beck knows. The whole town that matters comes to the house in black. The landscape room becomes the room of mourning. The painted hills look on unchanged. Elizabeth, in her mourning silk, receives them. She is graceful. She is exact. She thanks the senator, the pastor, the merchant houses. Her gloved hands tremble only when no one is watching. Tony, 12 years old, in a small black dress, holds her mother's hand. She does not cry. She has decided that a Buddenbrook does not cry in front of strangers. Christian, beside her, cries a little for both of them. Thomas stands a little apart. He is 14 now. He watches the way his father moves through the room. He decides, without quite deciding, that he will move that way too, from now on, always. They bury old Johann at St. Mary's, in the family crypt beside his first wife. The stone slab is opened, and the slab is closed. The consul stands a long minute with his hat in his hand. That evening the consul returns to the office on the Trave. He lights the green, shaded lamp. He opens the master ledger. At the top of a fresh page he writes the date, in a steadier hand than he expected. In one careful sentence he records what has happened. Father died this morning. The firm continues. Then he closes the ledger. He sits in the lamplight. He breathes once. He goes home. He writes one more letter that week, quietly, to Gotthold, his half-brother, to say that their father has died, to say that the firm cannot still divide the house, but that, if Gotthold needs help, the consul will help him personally. It is a small thing. It is the kind of thing his father would not have done. It does not undo the old wound, but it lets the consul sleep that night a little easier than the night before. If you drift off here, that's fine. The house is still standing. The consul has gone to bed. The children are asleep upstairs. The story keeps going on its own for a moment. Spring returns to Lu Beck. The consul takes his place at the head of the firm. The brass plate at the office door is repolished. Buddenbrook and Sons, it reads. The old name, the new generation behind it. Thomas, 16, leaves school early. He is to be apprenticed to the firm. He arrives at the office on his first morning in a new dark suit. His father shows him to a high stool. He climbs onto it carefully. He learns the way his father walks, the way his father reads a contract, the way his father pauses before answering a difficult question. He learns these things the way another boy might learn a sport. Christian, 16 too, is sent to a different desk. He cannot keep numbers in his head. He whispers to the clerks instead. He is funny. The clerks like him. The consul does not quite know what to do with him. Tony, 14, is sent to a finishing school for young ladies in another town. Sesame Wagebrodt School. A small house full of small chairs. Tony arrives with 3 trunks and the certainty that she will be the most important girl there. She is. She charms the teachers. She invents adventures for the other girls. She speaks of her father the consul as if he were a small king. The other girls believe her, mostly. She returns to Lu Beck for holidays a little taller, a little finer. Elizabeth notices. The consul notices. The conversation around the table begins, slowly, to shift toward the future. Toward whom Tony will marry. It is not unkind. It is simply how it is done. A girl of her family does not choose freely. A good marriage adds to the firm. A good marriage joins one merchant house to another. Tony, away at school, knows this in her bones. At 17 she is confirmed at St. Mary's. She wears a long white dress. She speaks the words the pastor asks her to speak. Her parents watch from the family pew. Old Johann's name still appears, faint, on a memorial plaque above them. She comes home from St. Mary's that day in her white dress. She walks through the landscape room. She passes the painted hills. She is a young woman now. The next chapter of her life is about to walk through the front door. His name is Bendix Grünlich, a merchant from Hamburg, mid-30s, carefully dressed, a little too carefully, gold blonde side, whiskers combed forward. He has business with the firm. He stays to dinner. The consul finds him agreeable. He speaks well. He praises the soup. He drops names of merchant houses Jean recognizes. He looks across the table at Tony more than once. Tony notices. She decides she does not like him. Grünlich stays in Lübeck 3 days. He calls again the next afternoon. He brings a small bouquet for Elizabeth. He brings a slim volume of poetry for Tony. Tony places the volume on a side table and forgets it on purpose. On the third afternoon, he asks for a private word with the consul. They withdraw to the office on the Trave. Grünlich speaks, very carefully, of his prospects, of his admiration for the Buddenbrooks firm, and of his admiration for Tony. The consul listens. He asks careful questions about Grünlich's business. He receives careful answers. He thinks of his daughter. He thinks of the family. He says he will speak with his wife and with Tony herself. That evening, the consul tells Elizabeth. Elizabeth is not opposed. He is solid, she says, careful, well-spoken. He has a good house in Hamburg already, by all accounts. The consul nods. He goes upstairs to find Tony. Tony is in her bedroom brushing out her hair. He sits on the small chair by her writing desk. He tells her very gently. Tony listens, then she laughs. Out of the question, she says, "He has yellow whiskers." The consul does not press her. He kisses her forehead. He goes out, lamp in hand. In the hallway, he stands a long moment. He thinks of the firm. He thinks of how a daughter's no this year may be different from her no next year. Grünlich, in the meantime, is patient. He stays in Lübeck a 4th day. He calls a 5th time. He charms Elizabeth. He plays a hand of cards with the consul. He never asks Tony directly for anything. He waits. Tony watches him operate. She tells her brother Thomas in the hallway one evening that she will never marry that man. Thomas, 16 now and serious, only looks at her. He says, "Perhaps you will. Perhaps you must." The consul calls Tony into the office on the Trave one morning. She has never been called there before. She crosses Lübeck Street's Old Town in her best dress. She climbs the wooden stairs. She is a little frightened. She does not show it. The consul receives her at his desk. He explains quietly the position of the firm. He explains that a marriage with Grünlich's house would secure the next 5 years. He does not order her. He simply lays it out. He tells her she may take time. He tells her that she may say no. He tells her, then, very gently, that the firm has carried the family for 90 years, and that her name is Buddenbrooks. He does not need to say more. Tony walks home alone. She does not take the carriage. She walks slowly along Lübeck Street's Old Town, past the brick gables. She passes St. Mary's. She passes the family crypt without knowing she is passing it. She thinks. That night she does not give an answer. She tells her father she needs the summer. He agrees. He arranges instead for her to spend that summer at the seaside at Travemünde, where, soon, she will meet someone else entirely. It is late June when Tony arrives in Travemünde. The carriage stops before a small, whitewashed cottage with green shutters and geraniums on the windowsill. The harbor pilot Schwarzkopf comes out, wiping his hands on a cloth. His wife receives Tony with bread and butter on a plate of blue and white Delft. The kitchen smells of coffee and salt air. Tony is shown to a small upstairs room with a view of the dunes. She has never slept in a small room before. At supper she meets the son of the house, Morten Schwarzkopf, a medical student in Göttingen, home for the summer. Quiet, bearded, watchful. He passes her the bread and looks at her once, briefly, before he looks away. The first morning Tony walks down to the beach alone. The Baltic is flat and pale. Wooden bathing carts stand at the edge of the sand. A row of woven beach baskets faces the water. The wind smells of salt and pine. In the afternoon, Morten asks if she would like to walk along the dunes. She says yes, because she is bored, because there is nothing else to do, because this is not the city, and the rules have loosened a little. They sit in the dunes. He tells her about Göttingen, about anatomy lectures, about the new political ideas the students are reading. Tony has never heard anyone speak this way. She finds, almost without noticing, that she is listening. Days move differently here. There is no landscape room to perform inside. There is no carriage clock counting visits. There is the tide. There is the wind. There is the smell of pine. There is Morten's quiet voice in the evenings on the porch. Mrs. Schwarzkopf notices, the way mothers notice. She does not say anything. She gives Tony a basket of cherries to take down to the dunes. She trusts her son. She trusts the summer to do whatever it is going to do. One afternoon he tells her, almost in passing, what he hopes to do with his life. To be a country doctor. To live in a small house. To know his patients by name. Tony listens. She does not laugh. She thinks of her father. She tells him, that evening on the porch, about Grünlich, about the office on the Trave, about the firm, about the marriage that is waiting at home for her. She speaks plainly. She does not perform. He listens for a long time. He says only, "There are different kinds of lives, you know." He does not push. He does not promise. He does not even reach for her hand. He says it as he might say it to a friend. Tony, that night, cannot sleep. The next morning they walk further than usual. Past the last bathing carts. Past the pavilion. Out to a low headland of grass. He tells her about his mother's people in Pomerania. She tells him about the painted hills in the landscape room. At the top of the headland they sit. He tells her, very quietly, that he has begun to love her. He apologizes for it. He says he knows she cannot. She does not answer. She closes her eyes against the bright Baltic light. When she opens her eyes, she says, "Wait until the end of the summer. Just wait. Just don't write to my father yet." He agrees. He understands what she is asking. They walk back along the boardwalk. Neither of them speaks. For 2 more weeks the summer lets them be. They take small walks. They sit at the supper table. They do not speak of the future at all. Mrs. Schwarzkopf gives Tony more cherries than anyone could eat alone. The Trave is calm. The pilot Schwarzkopf takes Tony out in his small sailing boat. He shows her how to read the wind. She laughs at the way the boom swings around. For a half hour she forgets she is a Buddenbrook. One night they walk down to the beach after supper. The moon is up over the Baltic. They do not say much. He takes her hand for a moment, she lets him. Then they walk back and she goes inside alone. Mrs. Schwarzkopf looks at her over breakfast the next morning. She says nothing. She refills the coffee. She thinks of her son. She thinks of the Buddenbrook firm in Le Bec. She thinks of the way these things usually go. The first letter from the consul arrives the following Tuesday. It is short. It is gentle. It says that Grünlich has called again. That Grünlich is patient. That Tony's mother sends her love. That the firm wishes her well. If you drift off here, that's fine. Tony is sleeping too. The summer goes on without us for a moment. The Baltic keeps moving softly outside the small upstairs window. A second letter comes 10 days later. It is no longer gentle. The consul writes that the firm has had a difficult quarter. He writes that Grönlich's house has offered terms that would help. He writes that he asks Tony to come home. Tony reads the letter twice. Then she folds it. Then she goes downstairs and tells Mrs. Schwarzkopf, very politely, that her trunks must be packed. She does not look for Morton. She hides from him for almost half a day. He finds her at evening, on the porch where they have spent so many quiet hours. She tells him, without looking at him, that she has been called home. He nods. He does not ask. He understands what is being asked and what is being answered. He says, "Write to me sometimes." From the small house in Hamburg. If they let you. She says she will. She knows, even as she says it, that she will not. They stand a long while in the lamplight. Then she goes in. The carriage comes for her in the morning. The Schwarzkopfs stand at the door. Mrs. Schwarzkopf gives her a small pot of jam wrapped in cloth. Morton hands her her traveling bag without quite touching her hand. Then it is over. The carriage rolls along the road back toward Lowback. Tony does not look back. She holds the small pot of jam in her lap. The road dips through pine. The Baltic disappears between the trees. The summer closes behind her like a door. She arrives back at Mengstrasse in the late afternoon. The landscape room is exactly as she left it. The painted hills are exactly where they were. The chandelier above the table is exactly where it was. Nothing in the house has changed. She has. Her father comes to her that evening in her bedroom. He does not ask about the summer. He does not ask about Schwarzkopf. He brings her the family Bible. He turns to the page where the Buddenbrooks family records its weddings. He says, "You do not have to." He says it again. "You do not have to." But Tony has been thinking all the long road home, and she has decided. She picks up the pen. She writes her name and Grönlich's name on the next clean line. The consul stands behind her. He does not speak. After she has set down the pen, he places one hand, very lightly, on her hair. Then he closes the Bible. He leaves the room. Tony sits a long while at her desk. The wedding is in the landscape room. Tony wears white satin, with orange blossom in her hair. Grönlich wears a fresh tan frock coat. The pastor of St. Mary's reads the words. Elizabeth weeps quietly into her lace handkerchief. There is a small reception. The merchant houses send their congratulations. Old Johann's portrait, in its dark gilt frame above the mantel, looks down at it all without expression. Old Johann would have approved of the firm's new friend. That evening Tony leaves Mengstrasse in a traveling carriage. Grönlich beside her. Her trunks strapped to the back. She does not turn her head as the carriage rolls down Heilewu Beck Street's old town, past the green spire of St. Mary's. Grönlich's house, in a quiet suburb of Hamburg, is large, new, and a little too furnished. Velvet curtains everywhere. Heavy mirrors. A small army of porcelain figurines on every shelf. Tony, on the first morning, finds it hard to breathe. Grönlich is a different man at home. Less smiling, more irritable. He criticizes her dress. He criticizes her cooks. He criticizes the way she pours coffee. Tony at first tries to please him. Then she stops trying. She writes home, often. She says everything is well. She says the house is large. She says Grönlich is generous. The consul in Lübeck reads the letters and frowns slightly. He does not say anything to Elizabeth. Yet, a child is born, a small daughter, Erika. Tony loves her at once and almost without thinking, the way some women love. The nursery becomes the only room in the Hamburg house she truly inhabits. Grünlich rarely visits it. Grünlich's business letters grow louder, then quieter, then begin to arrive in colored envelopes she has not seen before. He goes out to Hamburg in the mornings and returns later than she expects. He laughs less. He sweats slightly when the bell rings. One morning he tells Toni, almost in passing, that she should write to her father at once. That it would be very kind, he says, if her father could see his way to extending a temporary loan. A small one. To tide things over. Toni writes the letter. She writes it carefully. The consul reads it in his office on the Trave, beneath the green shaded lamp. He sets it down. He sends, that same afternoon, for his clerk and for the firm's accountant. Within the week the truth is on his desk. Grünlich has been borrowing for years. From everyone. The marriage was, in part, an attempt to cover the holes. Without help from Lwu Beck, the Hamburg house will fall, very soon, very loudly. The consul travels to Hamburg himself. He does not ride ahead. He arrives at Grünlich's door in a dark traveling cloak. He asks, quietly, to see Toni. Then he asks, very quietly, to see Grünlich's books. The conversation that night is brief. The consul will not pay Grünlich's debts. The marriage will be dissolved. Toni and the child will come home. Grünlich, very pale, asks for one more chance. The consul, very kindly, says no. Toni, upstairs in the nursery, has been told nothing yet. Her father comes up at midnight with a candle in his hand. He sits on the small chair beside her. He tells her gently. She listens. She closes her eyes for a moment, then she opens them. She says, "When do we leave?" Her father says, "Tomorrow morning." She nods. She begins, in the candlelight, to fold a small pile of the child's clothes. She does not weep. She has not been raised to. They leave Hamburg in the morning. Toni in her traveling dress, the child in her arms, the consul beside her in his dark cloak. Grünlich watches from an upper window. He raises a hand once. Toni does not see him do it. They reach Lwu Beck after dark. The consul lifts Erika out of the carriage. Elisabeth is waiting at the front door of Mengstrasse with a small lamp in her hand. She does not say anything. She holds out her arms for Toni first. Toni stays in her old upstairs bedroom that night. The child sleeps in a borrowed cradle by the window. The painted hills of the landscape room are below her, behind the floorboards. She does not feel like a Buddenbrook. She does not feel like anything at all. In the family Bible, the consul that week makes a small careful entry. Marriage of Antony and Bendix Grünlich, dissolved. He underlines nothing. He explains nothing. He simply records what has happened. It is the family way. Toni at 23 is back at home. Divorced. With a small daughter on her hip, she walks the landscape room again. The painted hills are the same painted hills. She is, for the first time in her life, quietly tired in the way her father is. Years move again. Erika begins to walk. The consul ages a little faster than the calendar would explain. Thomas at 25 takes a longer walk to the office than he used to. Christian, 25 also, has begun to travel. Christian goes first to London, then to Valparaiso, then Liverpool. He writes letters home full of small ailments and large schemes. The consul reads them in the evening lamplight. He folds them carefully. He does not always reply. Then, on an autumn afternoon, the consul does not come back from his afternoon walk on time. They find him in the doorway of the Mengstrasse house, leaning on the frame, very pale. He smiles when they reach him. Then he sits down on the step. They carry him upstairs. The doctor is sent for. The doctor stays a long time and then leaves, shaking his head very gently. The consul lies in the bed where his father died years before. He asks for his small Bible. He is given it. Through that night, Elizabeth sits beside him. Tony sits at the foot of the bed. Thomas, called from the office, kneels at the bedside, hands folded as he has been folding them since he was a boy. Christian is somewhere on a ship. Toward dawn, the consul slips away. He does not wake again. Elizabeth lays his small Bible on his chest and folds his hands across it. The room is very still. Outside Audiobook Street's old town begins faintly to come awake. The bell of St. Mary's tolls a second time, 20-some years after the first. Low Beck knows again. The landscape room becomes, again, a room of mourning. Elizabeth takes her place in her black silk gown and receives the town in black. They bury the consul beside old Johann at St. Mary's. Thomas stands at the head of the small group of mourners. He is 29. The firm now belongs to him. The brass plate at the office door will be repolished again. That same week, Tom takes his place behind his father's desk. He lights the green, shaded lamp himself. He opens the master ledger. At the top of a fresh page, he writes the date in a hand his father would have recognized. Almost. Elizabeth, without quite saying so, becomes a widow who runs a household. Tony, without quite saying so, becomes a daughter who runs the widow's house. Erica at 5 plays in the painted landscape room. The pattern reasserts itself. Tom is restless. He works long hours at the desk. He looks well in the cornflower he wears in his buttonhole every morning. But at night, alone in the office, he hears the old house in his head. He needs, he tells himself, a wife. He goes that spring on business to Amsterdam. He stays with the Arnoldson family, old friends of his father's. The Arnoldsons have a daughter, Gerda, 26, very tall, very pale, who plays the violin alone in a long upstairs room. Tom hears her playing as he is shown into the drawing room. He stands in the doorway listening. He has met other young women. He has not met one whose music made the small clock on the mantel stop, briefly, in his head. At dinner he speaks with her. She is calm. She is a little distant. She asks him about the Hanseatic ports, with real interest. She tells him she does not particularly want to marry. He thinks about that all evening. He calls again the next afternoon. He brings nothing. He simply asks if she would walk with him along one of the Amsterdam canals. She agrees. They walk a long while. They speak about her music and about his ledgers, almost as if these were the same thing. Within a fortnight, he asks her father for her hand. Her father, surprised but pleased, says he will leave it to Gerda herself. Gerda says yes, quietly, after a long pause. She tells Tom only one condition. She must keep her violin and her hours alone with it. They are married in Amsterdam, a small ceremony. Tom returns to Audiobook with Gerda beside him. The town that matters comes out very politely to look at the new Mrs. Buddenbrooks. Elizabeth is gracious. Tony is fascinated. They live, at first, in a wing of the Mengstrasse house. Gerda turns one of the upper rooms into a music room. She plays in the late afternoons. Erica at 6 creeps to the door to listen. Tony stands behind her listening too. Gerda is not unkind. She is simply elsewhere. She is polite to Elizabeth. She is tender, in her quiet way, with Tom. She is friendly with Tony. But the room she truly inhabits is the music room. And even Tom does not enter it without knocking. Christian, on the other hand, comes back from Liverpool in poor humor and worse health. He moves into a small set of rooms in the Mengstrasse house. He complains, often loudly, about the climate, about the food, about a mysterious pain in his left side. Tom finds him a small position in the firm. Christian sits on a high stool in the counting house on the Trave, beside the other clerks. He talks instead of writing. He laughs at private jokes. The clerks like him. The accounts do not improve. At dinner one evening, Christian, in front of family and clerks both, makes a joke about merchants in general. Every merchant, he says, is at heart a swindler. He laughs. The room does not quite laugh with him. Tom puts down his fork. That night Tom takes Christian aside in the office on the Trave. He tells him very quietly that he must never say such a thing again. The firm is what they have. The firm is what their father gave them. Christian stares at him. Then he laughs. He cannot help it. From that evening, the brothers are different brothers. Tom does not laugh in Christian's company anymore. Christian, sensing it, exaggerates everything. The fault in his side, the faults of merchants, the faults of L.U. Beck. Tony watches them quietly across the table. This is why we read these books at night. Not to learn anything, just to sit with the people inside them for a while, and to know we are not the first ones to feel any of this. That same year a small package arrives from Munich. From a Bavarian merchant Tony has met once at a friend's house in Piedmont. Alois Permaneter, stout, bearded, Bavarian to the soles of his boots. He has remembered her. He writes in dialect. Permaneter writes, plainly, that he has not stopped thinking about her since Piedmont. That he is a small but secure dealer in hops. That he has a sound little house in Munich. And that, if she would consider him, he would consider himself the most fortunate man in Bavaria. She shows the letter to her mother. Then to Tom. Tom reads it carefully. He says eventually that Permaneter is not a fashionable choice, but that the man is honest. And that, if Tony wishes to marry again, the family will not stand in the way. Tony writes back. Permaneter travels north. He arrives at the Mengstrasse house in a green Bavarian woolen jacket with bone buttons, looking enormously out of place and entirely unbothered by it. He sits down to dinner. He charms Elizabeth. He makes Tony laugh. He proposes within the week. He does it almost in passing, on a small bench on the garden behind Mengstrasse house, on a warm evening. Tony, to her own surprise, says yes. She tells herself it is a different kind of marriage this time. She tells herself she has chosen. This time the wedding is small. The pastor of St. Mary's reads the words again, in the landscape room. Tony wears a soft gray silk this time, not white. Erika at 8 stands in front of her, holding a small bouquet for a Bavarian stepfather she does not yet know. Permaneter takes Tony and Erika south. Munich is loud, Munich is warm. Munich is full of beer halls and sausages, and great brass bands in the late afternoons. Tony, at first, finds it astonishing. She is, for the first months, almost happy. Permaneter is exactly what he advertised, honest, unhurried, fond of his hops, fond of his beer, fond, in his blunt way, of his new wife. He kisses her cheek in the morning and goes off to the brewery district whistling. But Munich is not Lübeck. The conversations are foreign. The food is foreign. The faith is foreign. The rules are looser, and Tony, raised on rules, finds the looseness slowly disquieting. She begins, very gently, to miss the painted hills of the landscape room. A child is born in Munich and dies within the day. Tony does not write home about it for almost a fortnight. When she finally writes, she writes only one line. The pastor, she says, was very kind. Permaneter, after that, drinks in the evenings a little more steadily. One night Permaneter, who is a kind man and not a faithful one, does something foolish in the kitchen with the housemaid. Tony walks in on it. She does not scream. She does not weep. She steps back into the corridor and very quietly closes the door. She writes to her brother Tom that night. She writes to her mother. She writes the truth calmly and asks both of them whether the family will support her in another quiet dissolution. Then she sits in the dark until morning. The reply from Audiobook is brief. Of course. Come home. Tom writes that the firm will not contest the dowry. Elizabeth writes only, "Your room is exactly as you left it." Tony reads both letters once, then folds them inside her traveling bag. She tells Permaneder over breakfast. He cries, which surprises her, and apologizes, which surprises her more. He blames himself fully. He offers, awkwardly, to make any arrangement she wishes. Tony tells him gently that she would simply like to go home. He helps her pack. He carries the trunks down to the carriage himself. He kisses Erica on the head. He shakes Tony's hand at the carriage door, very seriously, like a man trying to behave correctly at the close of a contract he himself has broken. The road north is long. Tony watches Bavaria fall behind, then Saxony, then the flat northern plains. Erica, beside her, sleeps with her cheek against her mother's coat. Tony does not sleep. She holds in her gloved hand a folded letter from Tom. She arrives at Mengstrasse on a gray afternoon. Elizabeth opens the door herself. There is no welcoming party. There is no speech. There is only her mother, in a dark silk gown, holding out her arms first for Erica, and then, very quietly, for her. Tom, at the office, opens the family Bible that week and writes another careful sentence beneath the earlier one. Marriage of Antony and Alois Permaneder dissolved. He blots the ink. He closes the Bible. He sits a long while at the desk. Tony, twice divorced and not yet 35, becomes the household's quiet engine. She manages the cook. She instructs the seamstress. She walks Erica to school. She corrects strangers who do not know how to say the family's name. She does not laugh quite as often as she did. Christian, meanwhile, has gone again. To Hamburg this time. He has taken a small apartment near a music hall. He is, in a quiet way, in love with a singer. The family, with one shared exhalation, decides simply not to talk about it. Tom, almost 40, looks well in public and tired in private. The cornflour in his lapel is still fresh every morning. The shadows under his eyes are quietly deeper. He spends long evenings at the desk at the counting house on the Travemünde. He sleeps less than he should. He has decided, very quietly, that the family must look prosperous. So he buys a piece of land in the Fischergrube, the better street, and commissions a new house, pale stuccoed facade, tall windows, a glossy black door with polished brass. Elizabeth, watching from the Mengstrasse house, says nothing. Tony, looking at the architect's drawings, says only, "It is very fine." Gerda, asked her opinion, says, "There must be space for the piano." Then she goes back to her violin. A child of Tom and Gerda is born. A small son. They name him Johann after Tom's grandfather and father. They call him Hanno. He is small for his age, very pale, with large dark eyes that watch everything the way Christians used to. Tom looks at his son and sees, for one dizzying moment, 3 generations of small Buddenbrooks hands resting on top of each other. The thought passes. He does not let himself think it again. That same year Tom is elected to the Senate of Audiobook. He takes his oath in the Gothic council chamber of the Rathhaus. He puts on the gold senator's chain across his waistcoat. He stands in the carved oak chamber and, for one breath, allows himself to believe. That evening, in the new house on the Fischergrube, the Buddenbrooks dine alone for the first time. The dining room is lit. The polished mahogany shines. Gerda, in deep wine silk, raises her glass quietly. The small Hanno is asleep upstairs. Tony, at Mengstrasse with her mother, looks across the empty landscape room that night. The painted hills are exactly where they always have been. The brass chandelier hangs above the table. She thinks of her brother in his new house. She is glad for him and a little afraid for him, both. Elizabeth beside her does not say anything. She is older now, silver-haired, her shoulders slightly lower. She rests one hand on Tony's wrist for a moment. Then she turns to the embroidery hoop in her lap. The clock on the mantel ticks softly. The house for tonight is at rest. This is the height of the Buddenbrooks story. The new house on Fisher Grove is built. The senator's chain is on. A son is in the cradle. The painted hills in the landscape room still glow softly in the lamplight. From here, very gently, the curve begins to bend the other way. Hanno is 4 when we look at him properly. He is small for his age. He is too quiet for his age. His large dark eyes follow Gerda's hands when she lifts the violin. He listens to her play the way another child watches a fire. At 6 he begins, very seriously, to find his way to the upright piano his mother has placed in the corner of the hall. He climbs onto the embroidered piano stool. He stretches his small hands. He plays one note. He plays another. Gerda finds him there. She does not interrupt. She stands in the doorway and listens. He is not playing well. He is playing carefully. She sees, very quietly, what kind of child she has. Then she goes downstairs without saying so to anyone. Tom that evening is told. He listens. He nods. He says, "Well, he can play, of course. He must also learn to read a contract. The boy is a Buddenbrook." Gerda does not argue. She does not nod either. Hanno at 8 is sent to school. He is afraid of the other boys. He is afraid of the loud teachers. He is afraid of the inkwells that spill on his fingers. He comes home each day and goes straight, without speaking, to the piano. Tony comes often to visit Gerda and the boy. She brings small parcels, toy soldiers, picture books, a model wooden ship. Hanno politely thanks her. Then he carries them away to a shelf and goes back to the piano. Tony, watching, understands. Tom hears the music sometimes from the office. The new house is 2 streets from the firm. On certain afternoons, when the wind is right, a single faint piano line drifts across Hallebeck Street's Old Town to the counting house on the Travemünde. Christian in Hamburg marries the singer at last. The family hears about it through the bank. Tom replies politely. He sends a small gift. He does not invite his brother to visit. Christian, after all, is now a man with worsening health and a wife. Tom is 42. The cornflour in his lapel is still fresh every morning. The white in his hair is no longer one strand. He is a senator. He is the head of a 100-year-old firm. He sleeps badly. He thinks in the dark about money. The firm has been holding steady for years. Steady is no longer enough. Other Hanseatic houses are growing. Tom watches his rivals double in size. He begins, very quietly, to look for one large clean transaction that will set the firm right again. He hears, one evening at a private dinner, of a country squire near Pup and Raid. The squire is in difficulty. He needs a buyer for his entire summer wheat harvest. Now, before it is even cut, at a price that would make any merchant pause. It is the kind of deal old Johann would never have made, buying a harvest before it is harvested. Trusting weather, trusting one estate, the consul John would have refused too. Tom, alone at his desk that night, thinks for a long time. Then he says yes. He tells no one in the family except Tony. He tells her over breakfast, almost in passing. Tony listens. She is uneasy. She has lived through enough wrong decisions to recognize the small flicker of one. But she trusts her brother. She nods. That summer the harvest is poor. Worse than poor. A late hailstorm flattens half the wheat in the field. The squire of Poop and Raid is bound by no return clause. The contract is the contract. Tom has bought, in effect, a half-empty barn. Tom hears the news in the office on a Tuesday morning. He reads the telegram once. He reads it again. He folds it carefully. He places it in the drawer where his father once placed Gotthold's letter. He sits very still for a long minute. The loss is large but not fatal. The firm will survive. The firm will not be what Tom had hoped to make of it. The clean transaction has not happened. The 100-year jubilee of Buddenbrooks and Sons is, at the same time, 2 weeks away. The jubilee is held all the same. The clerks line the staircase. The merchant houses send congratulations. Tom shakes hands. He smiles when he is supposed to smile. Inside his coat pocket, the folded telegram from Pappenraid rests against his small Bible. Speeches are made in the columned hall. Old Johann's dark gilt, framed portrait is brought down from Mengstrasse for the occasion. The Consul Jean's portrait is brought too. Tom stands between them. He looks small briefly, and then he straightens up. That evening the new house on the Fischergrube is empty. Gerda has taken Hanno upstairs. Tom is in his study, alone, his coat unbuttoned, the gold chain across his waistcoat loosened. He reads the telegram one more time. Then he places it back in his Bible. Breathe here. The story keeps going on its own for a moment. The greatest books. They are not here to teach you anything. They are here to sit with you for a while in the dark. After the Jubilee, Tom goes back to the desk. He works long evenings. He cancels small social engagements. He no longer takes his afternoon walk. The cornflour in his ladle is still fresh. Gerda's housemaid changes it for him every morning, whether he asks or not. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Tom finds, on a side table in the new house, a borrowed book. The borrower is unclear. The title is German, a volume by a philosopher he has never read seriously, Schopenhauer. He picks it up out of half curiosity. He carries it to his armchair. He reads for an hour, then for 2. He reads about will and about suffering and about the small ego that thinks it is the center of everything. He reads about being only one wave among many. He reads slowly. He breathes once deeply. He sets down the book. For the rest of that afternoon he is, almost without noticing, lighter. He stands at the tall window and looks at Heirelwu Street's old town. The brass plate on the door of the counting house on the Trave, 2 streets away, no longer feels like the entire weight of his life. He never opens the book again. The next morning the small ego climbs back into the chair. The cornflour is fresh in his ladle. The ledgers are open. The afternoon is forgotten, except somewhere quietly, by the part of him that read those pages. Elizabeth dies that winter, quietly, in her own bed in the Mengstrasse house. Tony is with her. Tom comes from the office. Hanno is brought from the new house and stands silently in the doorway. The bell of St. Mary's tolls a 3rd time. They bury Elizabeth at St. Mary's beside her husband and her father-in-law. The family crypt is opened a 3rd time. The carved stone slab is closed again. Tony, in her black silk gown, stands beside her brother for the rest of the service. She does not weep until they are home. After that, the Mengstrasse house has, for the first time, no one in it who remembers the housewarming. The painted hills of the landscape room remain. The white tiled stove remains. The brass chandelier remains. There is no one left who can say where each one came from. Tom sells the Mengstrasse house. He cannot bear it. He cannot afford to maintain 2 great Leliebeck houses. The buyer is one of his rivals. The wallpaper of pastoral landscapes will be torn down within a year. Tony cries quietly at the news. She does not argue. On the last afternoon at the Mengstrasse house, Tony walks the rooms alone. She touches the painted hills. She runs one gloved hand along the polished mahogany. She stands a long while in the Mengstrasse house dining hall, beneath the empty walls where the portraits used to hang. She closes the front door of the Mengstrasse house behind her for the last time. She does not look back. She walks slowly along Har Elohu Beck Street's old town toward the new house on the Fischergrube. The brass key to Mengstrasse is in her gloved hand. Tom moves into the work. He works longer evenings. He attends fewer Senate meetings. The cornflour in his lapel is fresh every morning. The shadows under his eyes are now constant. He sleeps 4 hours a night, rarely more. His teeth begin to trouble him. He puts off going to the dentist. He puts it off again. Finally, on a winter morning, he walks the short distance from the office to the dentist on M. Wielenstrasse. He is 48 years old. The dentist is brisk and apologetic both. The procedure is brief. Tom rises from the chair. He pays. He walks out into the street. Halfway down the cobbles he stops. He sets one hand against a wall. He sits down very gently on the curb. Passers-by reach him within seconds. He is carried home. The doctor is sent for. By the time the doctor arrives, the senator is no longer with us. He died on the curb in his good coat, with his cornflowers still in the lapel. The bell of St. Mary's tolls a 4th time, in the same generation as the 3rd. The town that matters comes to the new house on the Fischergrube in black. Gerda receives them in deep violet, almost black. Tony receives them beside her, in plain mourning silk. They bury Tom at St. Mary's beside his father and his grandfather. The carved stone family crypt slab is opened a 4th time. Hanno, 10 years old, stands very small in his black sailor jacket between Gerda and Tony. He does not weep. He does not look up. That evening the executors of the firm meet in the counting house on the Trave. They open the senior partner's drawer. They find the Schopenhauer volume placed there beside the small leather Bible. They find the folded telegram from Piopenrade still inside the Bible. Christian, called from Hamburg, arrives ill and frightened. He is no longer the man for the firm. He has perhaps never been the man for the firm. The executors agree quietly with the family. The decision is made within the week. Buddenbrooks and Sons will be wound up. The brass plate beside the office door is removed one cold morning, very quietly, by a workman in a leather apron. He carries it away in a wooden crate. The wood beneath it is cleaner than the wood around it. Then a new firm's plate is mounted in its place. Tony watches from across Heilwu Beck Street's old town. She does not cross the street. She stands very still in her dark mauve coat. The wind moves a single strand of silver, streaked hair across her forehead. She does not push it back. Christian is sent quietly to a private home for nervous gentlemen, far from Hamburg. The singer-wife disappears with what is left of his money. The family does not speak of either of them at the table again. The new house on the Fischergrube is quieter than ever. Gerda takes Hanno upstairs to the music room more often. Tony comes daily from a small set of rented rooms nearby to sit with them. The marble-floored vestibule echoes a little when only one pair of feet crosses it. Hanno, 11, plays the piano now for hours each evening. He has begun to compose small wandering pieces, long quiet variations on a single phrase that seems to be looking, very politely, for an exit. One spring he comes home from school feverish. He says the lessons made his head hurt. He goes upstairs. He does not come down for dinner. By the next morning the doctor is sent for. The doctor says, typhoid. For days the small body fights. Gerda sits by the bed. She does not eat much. Tony comes in the mornings and takes Gerda's place so she may rest briefly. Tony sings very softly the lullabies her mother sang her at the Mengstrasse house 30 years before. The boy listens at first. Then he stops listening. Then his small, careful eyes do not quite open. The music in his head is very soft now, a single phrase. Repeating, gently looking very politely for the exit it has been riding toward all along. He slips away on a soft May afternoon. Gerda is holding his hand. Tony in the corridor sees Gerda's face in the doorway and understands without a word being spoken. The Buddenbrooks line in the mail ends in that small bedroom, very quietly. They bury Hanno at St. Mary's beside his father and his grandfather. The carved stone family crypt slab is opened a fifth time, very gently, for a much smaller coffin. The slab is closed. The carved name above the slab now ends in him. Gerda decides within the year to return to Amsterdam, to her father's house, to her violin. There is nothing for her in Beck now, she tells Tony gently in the marble-floored vestibule. Tony does not argue. She helps her pack. A small black traveling carriage takes Gerda away one gray morning. She does not look back. The new house on the Fischergrube is sold to a banker shortly afterwards. The banker is delighted. The polished mahogany shines for someone else now. Tony is left with Erika, now grown and married, sometimes visiting, with a small set of rented rooms above a quiet street near St. Mary's, with an embroidery hoop, with letters from Christian's home, with a single brass key to the Mengstrasse house she no longer owns. She is 50-something now. Her hair is silver-streaked. Her chin is still lifted, though a little less. She still corrects strangers who do not know how to say her family's name. She does it more gently than before. She walks past the Mengstrasse house once a week, sometimes more. The new owners have changed the curtains. The painted hills inside have been torn down, as the rumor said they would be. She does not stop. She just walks past. That, in plot, is the story. The firm gone, the men gone. A woman walking past a house she used to live in, with a brass key in her pocket she will never use. From here we step back very gently from the page to the man who wrote it. If you drift off here, that's perfect. This is where the story rests. We've reached the slow part. The night has done most of its work. The book holds itself for a moment. Now consider the man who wrote all of this, Thomas Mann. 25 years old when he begins, born in Lübeck himself, born into the same red brick city, into a merchant family, into a great old house on the same street. His own grandfather had run a Hanseatic firm. His own father had been a senator of Lübeck. His father had died young and the firm had been wound up almost as quickly as Tom's. Mann was 16 when that happened. He carried it with him. After that the family moved south, to Munich. The young man was supposed, eventually, to find a profession. He tried. He tried clerk work briefly, then literary journalism, then short stories. He found, to his own quiet surprise, that he could write. A small publisher in Berlin took an interest. Mann began something larger than a short story. He sat down to write what he called, in his letters, the novel of the Lübeck people. He thought it would be a few hundred pages. It turned out to be 1,000. He wrote it across 3 years. Most of the book in Munich, some of it in Italy, in a cheap pension in Rome with his brother Heinrich. He wrote in the mornings. In the afternoons he walked. In the evenings he reread what he had written and crossed quietly through. He wrote letters during those years to a friend in Lübeck. He asked, in those letters, very specific questions. The price of grain in 1846. The wallpaper in his grandfather's drawing room. the exact words of a particular LOU Beck dialect joke. The friend always answered. He used those answers to build the Mengstrasse house, to paint the landscape wallpaper, to carve the staircase, to set the brass plate beside the office door on the Trave. He built a city he had been carried away from at 16, room by room, in his own head. He gave the family a name very close to his own. Buddenbrook, instead of Mann. He gave them a different number of children. He moved their fates around. He told the truth about them by lying about the small details. That is what novels do. The book came out in 2 volumes in 1901. The publisher was nervous, 1,000 pages, by an unknown writer, about a single merchant family in a single city most readers in Berlin had never visited. Mann himself was 26 by the time it appeared. It sold slowly at first, then it sold steadily. Within a few years, a single-volume edition was issued. That edition sold 100,000 copies. By the time the young man was 30, his book had become quietly one of the most read German novels of its generation. His own family in Lübeck read the book carefully. Some of his cousins recognized themselves. They were not, on the whole, pleased. Some of them never spoke to him again. Mann did not apologize. He had loved them by writing them. He could not have done it any other way. In 1929, Mann was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Swedish Academy named specifically this novel as the work for which the prize was given. By then, Mann had written others. But the family on Mengstrasse had carried him to Stockholm. He left Germany in the 1930s. He went into exile. He lived for years in California. He kept writing about Joseph, about Faust, about Germany itself. But Buddenbrooks remained the book that strangers in train stations would still recognize him by. When he died in 1955, the small dark green 2-volume edition of Buddenbrooks was, in some German households, still on the same shelf where it had stood for 50 years. Some of those copies are still there today, on shelves their owners inherited, beside other inheritances. Now think about the city he was writing about. Lübeck, a small, wealthy port on the Baltic. For 500 years before Mann was born, the city had run itself like a small republic of merchants. The Hanseatic League, a confederation of trading cities along the northern seas. For centuries, the same families ran Lübeck. The same names appeared on the Senate. The same names were carved into the family crypts at St. Mary's. To be born into one of those families was to be born into a job no one had quite asked you whether you wanted. The job came with a script. You went to school. You were apprenticed to the firm. You traveled briefly to 1 or 2 other Hanseatic ports. You came home. You married someone else from a Hanseatic family. You sat one day on the Senate. You died at a dignified age. Within that script there was very little error. The job was honorable. The job was prosperous. The job was not, on the whole, a question. And for many generations of Hanseatic merchants, the script was a comfort. Exactly as the Mengstrasse house at Christmas was a comfort. But by the middle of the 19th century, the world the script was written for was already changing. Steam shipping, long-distance telegraphs, larger international firms, other German cities, Hamburg above all, outgrowing the small Hanseatic firms that had founded them. The Buddenbrook firm in the novel is, in plain economic terms, a firm caught between 2 worlds. The world that taught it to be careful, slow, and dignified, and the new world in which careful, slow, and dignified firms were being quietly bought up by larger ones. That economic pressure is in every page of the novel. It is in why the consul tells Tony so gently that the firm has had a difficult quarter. It is in why Tom buys the Pelpenraid harvest. It is in the small held breath behind every careful Hanseatic dinner. At the same time, all around the Buddenbrooks, Germany itself was changing. Bismarck was unifying the German states. The new Kaiserreich was being built. The small free city of Lobeck became, in 1871, a part of a much larger and louder country. The Hanseatic Patriciate did not lose its dignity overnight, but its political weight, its sense of itself as a small republic, faded. The merchants now answered to a Reichstag in Berlin. Their Senate was still their Senate, but it ran in the shadow of an imperial calendar. The novel does not lecture about any of this. It does not need to. It shows you the brass plate beside the office door. It shows you the gold senator's chain across Tom's waistcoat. It lets you feel, without naming it, the weight that script has begun to carry. Notice that the men of the family are the ones who carry the firm. Old Johann, Jean, Tom, Hanno, who would have been next. The script is a male script. The women, Elizabeth, Tony, Gerda, live within it. They feel it, they keep it. But it is not theirs. That is part of why Tony's 2 marriages matter so much. Tony's marriages are the place where the male script meets the female life. She is asked twice to carry the firm by giving herself in marriage. She does. The script does not, in the end, hold, and it is partly why the boy at the piano matters so much. Hanno is, in the male line, the end. He is the heir of all 4 generations. And the only language he can speak fluently, the only language that holds him, is music. Mann himself, in interviews many years later, said that Hanno was very close to himself as a boy. The boy who could not stay inside the male script. The boy who was supposed to inherit the firm, and instead, inwardly, was already becoming an artist. So Buddenbrooks, in one direction, is a quiet love letter to a city. In another direction, it is a sober economic chronicle of a class disappearing. And in a third direction, it is a young writer's letter to himself about why he could not have stayed. The phrase he used as the subtitle of the book was Verfall einer Family. The decline of a family. 3 plain German words. Not fall, not ruin. Verfall is closer to wearing away, a slow softening, a long quiet weakening at the edges. Mann meant the word carefully. The Buddenbrooks do not crash. There is no scandal. There is no public ruin. There is, instead, a great deal of dignity. The brass plate is repolished. The cornflour is fresh. And underneath, very slowly, the strength is going out. That kind of decline was, in 1901, a relatively new subject for a German novel. Earlier German novels had told of single great men, or of single tragic fates. Mann told instead of a slow biological softening across 4 generations. He invented, almost, a new genre. Other writers had told family stories before. But Mann's family novel was about something quieter, the slow loss of fitness for a particular form of life. The slow turning of a household from a place of work into a place of memory. He showed how that turning happens in the smallest gestures. A senator going to the dentist, a boy putting his hand to a piano key, a daughter folding a letter into her traveling bag, a widow embroidering by lamplight. Each of these is small. Each of them is the family declining. Mann's gift was to let you feel both at once. Other novelists picked up that genre after him. Galsworthy in England wrote the Four-Seat Saga. Roger Martin Dugard in France wrote Les Thibault. Garcia Marquez, much later in Colombia, wrote 100 Years of Solitude. All of them stand in some quiet way on Mann's shoulders. It is hard to overstate how influential the form Mann invented in 1901 has been. The long, quiet family chronicle, watching a house across generations. So many novels, so many films, so many television series, since then have been quietly written in its shadow. But the Buddenbrook house on Mengstrasse is the original of all those houses. The painted hills wallpaper, the white tiled stove, the brass chandelier. They are the small grandparents of every great old fictional house that has stood in a novel since. There is a small museum in Lübeck now, inside the actual house on Mengstrasse. The Buddenbrook house, they call it. Visitors walk through carefully reconstructed rooms. The landscape room, the dining hall. They pause politely. They photograph the chandelier. Many of those visitors have read the novel. Many have not. They walk through anyway. They feel something they cannot quite name. Mann was right. The Mengstrasse house was always going to outlast the family that built it. And the book made sure of it. For a tired adult tonight, the book offers something more personal than a guided tour. It offers a slow and patient companion. It does not rush. It does not raise its voice. It sits beside you. It tells the story of a family the way a kind stranger might tell you about their own. It is, in that sense, a generous book. A very long book that asks nothing of you. You can put it down for a year and pick it up again. The Mengstrasse house will be exactly where you left it. The painted hills will not have moved. Many people read it for the first time in their 20s, and it is a different book to them than the same book is in their 40s. In the 20s, it is mostly about the marriages. In the 40s, it is mostly about Tom. In the 60s, it is mostly about the empty rooms. It is not a sad book exactly. It is a quiet book. A book that respects the dignity of small lives. A book that does not punish the people inside it for being who they are. The decline is real. The tenderness is also real. The two live together on the page. That is rare in literature. So many great novels prosecute their characters. So many great novels are angry about something. Buddenbrooks is not. It looks at its people the way an old friend might. With seeing eyes. Without judgment. With something close to love. That tone is itself an inheritance. Mann learned it from Tolstoy, from Flaubert, from Fontaine. He passed it on to Galsworthy and to Garcia Marquez. The patient, kind, undeceived eye on a family across time. He took it. He refined it. He gave it back. It is also, in a quiet way, a book about how money behaves inside a family. How a marriage can be also a business decision. How a harvest can decide a brother's life. How a brass plate on a door can carry, beneath its polish, the sleep of 3 generations. That is part of why working adults today still find their way to it. The script today is different. The houses are different. The cities are different. The pressure of duty handed down. The small weight in the chest of doing what is expected. That is exactly the same. The Buddenbrooks would understand a long workday. They would understand answering messages politely. They would understand smiling at a dinner you did not want to attend. They would understand the small H that carried you, this evening, to a quiet hour with a book. That is the story behind the story. A young man in Munich, an old city in the north, a century turning, a genre being invented, and on the page, a single great old house quietly emptying. That is what we are listening to tonight. A book outlives its writer in 2 different ways. It can stay famous because of an event in history, or it can stay famous because, in some quiet corner of human life, it keeps describing what is happening to us. Buddenbrooks is the second kind. The historical event past. The Hanseatic Patriciate is, as a class, gone. The merchants of Lübeck no longer run a small republic. The brass plates on those doors are now mostly the names of dentists, lawyers, and small architectural firms. But the inner experience the book describes, the slow softening of strength inside a family, The heaviness of an inheritance no one quite asked for. That experience has not gone anywhere at all. It has only changed clothes. Mann himself was the first Nobel laureate of his particular kind. The German novelist of a vanishing bourgeois Europe, the Academy in Stockholm gave him the prize specifically for Buddenbrooks. They saw, even then, that he had named something other writers had been circling around. That something is, in plain words, the experience of a class that knows it is becoming smaller. The merchant patriciate, the country gentry of England, the plantation families of the American South, the samurai families of Meiji Japan, every culture has had one. After Mann, several writers picked up that quiet subject. Galsworthy gave it to England in the Forsyte Saga. Roger Martin Dugard gave it to France in Les Thibault. Lampedusa gave it to Sicily in The Leopard. Each of them listened, in some way, to Mann. Each of those novels, like Buddenbrooks, looks at a class that is leaving the stage. Each of them tells us, gently, that to be born into the end of something is also a way of being born into something. The end has its own dignity. The end has its own art. Mann's book, in particular, told that story without sentimentality. It did not pretend the Buddenbrooks were better than they were. It did not pretend they deserved to last. It simply showed them, in their full humanity, walking gently out of the room. That refusal to sentimentalize is part of why Buddenbrooks reads so well today. There is no nostalgia in the book. There is, instead, a long, careful, accurate looking. Mann does not miss the painted hills. He simply describes them before they were torn down. That is also why the book is, in 2026, on a quiet shelf in so many Sarah's apartments. It does not ask you to mourn anything. It asks you only to sit beside someone who has already mourned for you. That is, in the end, a great kindness. When you read about Tony walking past the Mengstrasse house she no longer owns, you may notice, very quietly, that you yourself have walked past something like that. A street you used to live on, a friendship you used to have, a self you used to be. Mann's word for that experience, verfall, is more useful than the English. In English we tend to say, decline, which sounds like a graph going down. The German word feels more like a slow letting go. The strength leaves quietly. No one rings a bell. That experience is, in 2026, also yours. The strength leaving the family business of the bigger company you work for. The strength leaving the institutions you grew up trusting. The strength leaving an old friendship into ordinary politeness. None of it announces itself, verfall. Mann shows you that this is not a personal failure. It is a long inheritance. Other generations have walked through this corridor. Other Tonys have signed the family Bible. Other Toms have died at the dentist with a cornflower in the lapel. You are not alone in any of it. That, more than anything, is what people mean when they call Buddenbrooks a comforting book. The comfort is not that everything turns out well. It does not. The comfort is that someone has been here before, and someone has written it down, and you are reading it tonight. Notice that the book does not give Tony a happy ending in the modern sense. She does not find love. She does not find a great independent career. She does, however, find herself. By the last page, she is the most steady character in the book. That is its own kind of victory. She has lost 2 husbands. She has lost a father, a mother, a brother, a nephew. She has lost the great house she was born in. She has not lost her name. She has not lost her chin. She has not lost the ability to correct a stranger about the family pronunciation. That, too, is a thing the book gives you. The picture of a person who has been disappointed for 40 years and is still, in her own quiet way, walking the streets of her city upright. That is not a small thing. That is one of the secret central images of the book. It rhymes with a great many lives today. Lives that did not turn out the way the script said. Lives that lost more than they expected to. Lives that, even so, still take a careful walk to a corner cafe in the late afternoon. Mann respected those lives. He gives them the most important thing a writer can give. He gives them the dignity of being written down. He says, on every careful page, your small ordinary survival is worth 100 careful sentences. Yes, it is. He was right. There is a school of thought that says the great books should be read with concentration, with notes, with reverence. There is also another, older school of thought that says they should sometimes be read in bed, in the dark, a few pages at a time, almost as company. This channel is built on that older school of thought. The greatest books read slowly, in the dark, until your eyes close on their own. Buddenbrooks is, perhaps, the most natural fit of all. It is itself a book about the slow turning of evenings into nights. Most of the most quietly powerful scenes in the book happen at night. The consul reading Gotthold's letter in the office, Tom reading Schopenhauer in the armchair, Tony sitting in the dark at her desk in Munich, Hanno at the piano. Each of these scenes is lit by a single small lamp. Mann, as a writer, was a night writer. He did most of his thinking after dinner, walking, smoking, alone with his own sentences. He understood that there is a particular kind of attention you only have at the end of the day. He wrote for that attention specifically. He wrote for the attention that is not trying to win anything. The attention that is not building a presentation in the morning. The attention that has put the day down and is not yet asleep. That kind of attention is rare. He honored it. He still does. That kind of attention is also what we are practicing right now together. You and the book in a quiet voice. No assignment is being graded, no goal is being met, no box is being checked. The greatest book of a particular kind, read slowly, in the dark. Mann would have approved of this format. He would have considered it the proper home for a long, quiet novel. He would have said, yes, of course, read it that way. Read it in pieces. Read it before sleep. Read it when you are tired. The book is patient. The book is generous. There is one more thing worth saying. The Buddenbrook house was, in real life, severely damaged in the bombing of Lübeck in 1942. The interior was destroyed. The exterior survived. After the war, the building was carefully rebuilt. The painted hills were not. The painted hills now exist only in the novel. They cannot be seen anymore by anyone walking through the museum on Mengstrasse. They live, instead, on the page. That, too, is what books are for. To keep things that have already been lost. Many small things in your own life are like that. A grandmother's voice. A particular smell of a kitchen at Christmas. The way a particular street looked in 1998. None of them can be seen anymore. Some of them live only in the part of your head that remembers them at night. A book like Buddenbrooks gives you a quiet place to put those memories down for a while. You can listen to other people's painted hills being torn down. And, in some quiet way, the small loss in your own chest gets to rest beside theirs. That is not nothing. So, if tonight you have followed the Buddenbrooks all the way to the end, that is good. If you have drifted off somewhere in the middle, that is good. If you have been half, listening through the historical chapters with your eyes closed, that is, in some ways, the best way. The book will still be on the shelf tomorrow. The Mengstrasse house in the museum will still be there in 2026. The painted hills on the page, will still be there in any year you care to come back to them. Books are very patient about this. There is only a little of the night left for us together. Soon we will go back, very gently, into the world of the novel. We will say goodnight to each of the people we have met. We will close the door of the Mengstrasse house behind us, very quietly. For now, take a slow, soft breath. Notice that your shoulders have softened. Notice that the room around you is dim. Notice that the day is, in fact, behind you. The Buddenbrooks understood evenings like this. They had them too. They sat with their lamps low. They listened to the small clock on the mantel. They thought about the day's letters. They thought about the people who were no longer at the table. Then, eventually, very gently, they went upstairs. So will we. Notice that the rooms in the book have grown very quiet. The lamps inside the Mengstrasse house are being snuffed one by one. The chandelier above the table is dim. The painted hills are softly out of focus. The story is, in its own gentle way, putting itself to bed. The next 10 minutes will be the slowest part. The voice will be softer. The pictures will be gentler. The sentences will be shorter. You do not have to follow them all. The book will keep going on its own. You may simply rest. For another minute, breathe. The Buddenbrooks have all said goodnight. The painted hills have settled in their wallpaper. The brass chandelier is still. The bell of St. Mary's is silent. The Trave is moving softly, far away in the dark. We are nearly at the end of the night. A few last small images. A few last quiet sentences. And then a single word, very softly, to close the book. Stay with us, or drift off if you need to. Either way is right. The Mengstrasse house in the book's last chapter is quiet. Tony sits with Erika in the small rented sitting room near St. Mary's. They are reading the last letter from Christian's home. They are not crying. They are simply reading. Outside Beck Street's old town is settling into evening. The gas lamps are coming on. The shop windows are dim. A small mist is gathering off the Trave. The brick gables lean a little closer to the dark. The city is preparing to sleep. In the small rented sitting room, Tony folds the letter. She places it on the side table. She turns to her daughter. She says, "Well, we are still here." Erika smiles softly. She agrees. They both know how much that small sentence carries. They put on their coats. They leave the sitting room. They walk down to the lamplit street. Tony holds Erika's arm. They take the long way home through the old town, past the closed door of the Mengstrasse house, as Tony often likes to do. They pass the polished oak door. Tony does not stop. She glances at the windows once. The new owner's bright green silk curtains are drawn. Inside, a single warm amber lamp is just visible. The painted hills are gone. The house, from outside, looks well. Tony takes her daughter's arm a little tighter. They keep walking. They turn into a side lane. The gas lamps are softer here. The cobbles are wet. The Trave is somewhere ahead, moving gently in the dark. At the garden behind Mengstrasse house, the gate is locked now. Tony does not try the gate. She stops for a single breath, gloved hand on the iron rail. She thinks briefly of 3 children playing in the box hedges. Then she walks on. They turn out of the lane. They climb the small slope toward Tony's rented rooms. The lamp is still glowing softly in the upstairs window where they left it. The embroidery hoop is still on the side table. The teacups are still on the tray. Inside, Tony hangs up her coat. Erika lights a second lamp. The fire is low. The teapot is brought back. They sit together in the soft, warm light. They do not need to say much. The day has done its work. The night is settling around them. Far away, in the empty Mengstrasse house, The new owners are doing the same thing. They are sitting in their bright sitting room. They are pouring their tea. The painted hills are gone. The brass chandelier is still where it always was. The house keeps holding its evening. Even further away in Amsterdam, Gerda is in her father's house. The violin is in her hands. The single lamp on the music stand is lit. She is playing one of Hanno's small wandering pieces, slowly, carefully, as a remembrance. Even further away in a quiet country house, Christian is asleep in a small clean bed. A kindly attendant has just turned out the lamp. He is no longer in pain. The house is calm, the garden outside is dark. He is at last at rest. At Mary's, the carved family crypt is quiet. The carved name above the slab is the same as it has been for 100 years. Old Johann, Jean, Thomas, Hanno. The four of them are at rest there together. The vast brick nave above is dark and cool. In her small sitting room, Tony rests her head against the wing of her chair. Erika softly turns down the lamp. The fire is low. The clock on the mantel ticks gently. The day has gone home. The evening is almost done. Outside, the gas lamps of Tyloo Beck Street's old town are turned down low. The brick gables are quiet. The green spire of St. Mary's is faint against the dark sky. The bell tower has rung the last hour. The city is asleep. Down at the harbor, the Trave is moving softly under the moon. A single moored merchant ship rocks very gently. A single rope creaks. A single lantern on a jetty pole is still burning. The water is dark. The Baltic is somewhere beyond. At a Travemünde beach and pavilion, the dunes are pale under the moon. The boardwalk is empty. The white wooden pavilion with green shutters is dark. The Baltic is flat and quiet. The summer Tony spent here is a long time ago now. The Schwarzkopf cottage is dark too. The kitchen is empty. The geraniums on the windowsill are still. Morton, who became a country doctor, sleeps far away in another small house. Tony's letter that she meant to write to him never quite got written. The whole north coast is asleep. The Baltic is breathing softly. The forest of low pine between Travemünde and Lübeck is still. A single owl is somewhere in it not calling. The moon is high. Nothing is hurrying. Nothing needs to. Back inside the small rented sitting room, Erika stands up. She kisses her mother on the forehead. She turns down the second lamp. She goes through the small door to the next room. Tony is already half asleep in her chair. Tony, in the warm amber lamplight, breathes once, deeply. The shawl is soft over her knees. The clock is ticking gently. Her chin is still lifted, a little. She is still a Buddenbrook. She always will be. She closes her eyes. That is the last image of her in the book. A woman in a wing chair, silver, streaked hair pinned high, chin still slightly lifted, eyes gently closed in the warm amber lamplight. She has done what she could. The book lets her rest. If tonight helped, even a little, there is a subscribe button somewhere on this page. Quietly. Next week, another book, a different night, the same voice. For now, only a few last small images. A few last quiet sentences. The painted hills, very faintly, in the part of the book that remembers them. The brass chandelier above an empty table. The small clock ticking. The brass nameplate beside the office door, removed and carried away in a wooden crate, somewhere now in a quiet attic of a small Lübeck house. The Schopenhauer volume on a side table, still unread by anyone since. The folded ivory-wooled family shawl on the back of a mahogany chair in the landscape room, where Elizabeth always left it. Still folded, still soft, still there in the part of the book that keeps it. The book will still be here tomorrow. So will we. Sleep well. Next time, something older. A different kind of quiet. Bring your night. Good night, Hanno. Good night, Tony. Good night, Mengstrasse. Good night, Lübeck rain. The lamps are out. The clocks are slow. The painted hills are quiet. The Trave moves softly in the dark. The book closes very gently on its own. Good night.